Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, welcome to your latest Fortress of Rock episode. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard. Couple hours earlier than normal. Usually like to wait until Friday evening, start to mellow out for the weekend, but big concert tonight. Stone Temple Pilots and Everclear. So, episode 57 here on September the 16th. 2022 hits a few hours earlier than normal. Nothing else changes though. Same format, same segments, same topic, rock and frickin' roll. News of the World, segment 1, as always, in tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. Probably going to have a little bit shorter episode this week, just going to give you a warning up front. Although I'm looking at segment 3, and I have got a lot to discuss, and I want to go back. But, quick segment here with News of the World. Not a lot of interesting topics to discuss this week. Sorry. Not a great sell, but there is good stuff coming in segments 2 and 3, I promise. We talked about Aerosmith last week and how they are back out on the road after COVID delays, after Steven Tyler's rehab delays. I was really jealous about this one. Fenway Park on September the 8th. 38,700 packed into Fenway Park. That was a concert record for Fenway Park in terms of tickets sold. Aerosmith performing with their fellow Bostonians. Love Extreme, one of my favorite underrated bands. Aerosmith and Extreme at the home of the Boston Red Sox. Again, very jealous. Would have loved to have seen that show. I have never been able to see Extreme in concert. Still holding out hope that one day I will be able to catch Gary Cherone and Nuno Bettencourt and the rest of the band. We talked about David Lee Roth. Also, this very peculiar, very bizarre situation. Again, discussed it last week. All this news, all these tracks starting to leak out from these mysterious May the 3rd, 2022 recording sessions where he supposedly jammed out for 2 hours. They recorded 14 songs, the band that he got together. Now, the weird, confusing thing about it is David Lee Roth initially let out his version from these sessions of Panama. And now this past week, he has released a version of Ain't Talking About Love. Okay, fine. But there seems to be some misinformation here, or something's not as clear as it should be, because the bare bones details that are being released along with these songs, and I'm repeating what I said last week. Of course, May the 3rd, 2022, Henson Recording Studio. 14 songs in 2 hours, all recorded live, but David Lee Roth says no Van Halen. So what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that he's saying no other member of Van Halen was involved? Or is he saying on top of the 14 songs they recorded, they happened to just screw around and do the Panama and the Ain't Talking About Love alternate versions? That's where I'm getting confused. When he says no Van Halen, is he talking about no Van Halen members involved? Because obviously now we've got 2 songs that have been released from these studio sessions that are Van Halen songs. So what is it, Dave? Are there 14 new songs out there we have to look forward to? Are there 14 songs we're never going to see the light of day? Or is most of it just rehashed, warmed over old Van Halen without Alex, Wolfie, Mikey involved? Of course, David Lee Roth is involved, so obscurity and vagueness are expected. I usually don't talk about album reissues all that much. There's so many of them out there now, and I have complained about how a lot of these older classic legacy acts, all they're doing is resting on their laurels, and all they're doing is re-editing, re-engineering all their biggest hits, albums or songs from the past, and then just saying, hey, let's reissue them and let's get some more money out of our sucker fans. To me, it's almost contemptuous how they do that. Now, I remember Soundgarden had a reissue years and years and years ago. And at least they were smart enough to say, we're not going to hose our fans. We're going to take all the outtakes and all the stuff that we've never really released before and put that on a separate disc and release that for the fans that have bought all the albums so they can at least get a hold of this new stuff. But most artists don't do that. Most artists expect you to shell out 20, 30, 40, hundreds of dollars for these deluxe reissues where they throw in a couple live concerts or they throw in a replica program or a poster. Not a big fan of that. Really not a big fan of that. But I am going to talk about a reissue this week. I am going to talk about one of the most important and one of the greatest albums from the 1980s, and that would be John Cougar Mellencamp's Scarecrow. A deluxe edition of Scarecrow is coming out November the 4th. I've looked at the track list for the double CD version. It's really on the fence between actually being something new, something interesting that a John Cougar Mellencamp fan, yes, I keep using Cougar because I've said on this show in the past, coolest rock name ever, he never should have abandoned it. You, of course, get the full album on disc 1, the reissued version with a couple bonus tracks. Then you get a second disc, and of course, that's where the fan is going to be delving into those tracks, delving into that content. And it's about half and half between acoustic versions, studio versions before editing, and there are some new songs, some cover songs. So it's going to be really interesting to see what this reissue, this deluxe edition, has to offer. I will definitely not be buying it ahead of time. I will definitely listen to that second disc when it comes out on Spotify. And again, usually they price gouge you on this stuff. Usually it's not a couple extra bucks. And there are exceptions. Some artists are pretty cool about this type of thing. So we'll see how this plays out for John Mellencamp. And of course, I think As much as I love his music, especially his earlier music, I don't have a lot of faith in him anymore in terms of him caring about what his fans think. He seems like he's become contemptuous of his fans, so I can see this 2 CD deluxe edition of Scarecrow being $25-$30, and I will say no thank you. The Doors, November the 25th, Record Store Day, Black Friday edition. Those of you out there who partake in vinyl and love Record Store Day, where you get these special reissues, sometimes live performances that we haven't heard before. Once in a while, we'll get some new stuff. I've never gone to Record Store Day on Record Store Day. I've wandered in a day or two after. I've bought one Record Store Day release. I've got an old, terrible, crappy record player. But when Collective Soul's Ed Roland a few years back put out The Living Room, a side project he was doing in tribute to the Cars, I had to have that. That is the one time I have bought a Record Store Day release. So, November the 25th, Black Friday, Record Store Day returns. The last known unissued studio track by the Doors, Paris Blues, which is also the name of the Record Store Day vinyl release. It's got a lot of live tracks. It's got a couple songs with Ray Manzarek on vocals. But Paris Blues, you've got to read about the legend of this song. Now, Robbie Krieger, Ray Manzarek both have said that it is not a great song. There's a reason why it didn't make any of their albums. LA Woman, that's the sessions that they recorded Paris Blues during. They've both confirmed that. The legend goes Ray Manzarek's child, I believe his name is Pablo, got a hold of the last master tape of the song. I think Ray Manzarek left it in the tape deck at his house, and young Pablo started hitting the buttons as toddlers, infants are wont to do, and of course hit record multiple times. So the last known demo of the song got completely messed up. Again, the stories are that there's gurgling from Ray's child at certain points during the song, but somehow they have been able to piece it together. I believe the term they used is creative re-editing, to put together one final song from the Doors with Jim Morrison, Paris Blues. Look for that November the 25th. And then finally, we're going to talk more about Ozzy Osbourne here coming up in Breakdown as we review patient number 9. I ranted and raved last week about the travesty that was the NFL's opening game, where they promised we were going to see an Ozzy Osbourne halftime show. And of course, the hypocrites that the NFL are, the desperation they show to spit on their older fans because they've got to try to bring in the younger fans. So why even schedule Ozzy Osbourne if that's the case? So they schedule Ozzy Osbourne at SoFi Stadium in LA. Again, I know I discussed this last week. Bear with me. The NBC broadcast shows 10 seconds of Ozzy playing Patient Number 9, the title track off his new album. Well, of course, finally, the full halftime show has been released online. So if you want to see Ozzy doing Patient Number 9 and Crazy Train, go check that out. I'm sure YouTube's got it. And then one more Ozzy tidbit here dealing with Patient Number 9. Now, Taylor Hawkins appears on, I believe, 3 songs on the new album. Of course, all recorded before he passed away. Word is that there are more songs featuring Taylor Hawkins that we will be hearing down the road. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of my commentary about Patient Number 9 for my official review and breakdown, which is coming up right after a quick promo. So hang out for a few minutes, kids. I'll be right back with reviews of Patient Number 9 and new music from Nickelback, Alter Bridge, and The Cult. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock Friday afternoon, September the 16th, 2022. This is episode 57. As always, segment 2 is breakdown, album reviews, song reviews, concert reviews, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Album review this week, the new Ozzy Osbourne, Patient Number 9. I can't say I've been looking forward to this with any kind of true excitement. I haven't really been impressed with Ozzy's studio recordings recently. And the first 2 singles, first 2 releases off of Patient Number 9, of course, the overlong 7+ minute title track and Degradation Rules didn't really give me much more in terms of confidence. 13 songs. As always, we go track by track. First up is the title song, Patient Number 9, featuring Jeff Beck. The first 10 songs, by the way, on Patient Number 9, all have featured guitar players, and I will highlight them as we go through the list of songs. The last 3, Ozzy went it alone with his current regular band. Patient Number 9 is overlong. I've already implied that. Over 7 minutes. Boy, if you're going to go that long with a song, it better be Stairway to Heaven. It better be Freebird. It better be Fight the Good Fight. It better be one of those longer songs in rock history that was able to shift tempos to feature fantastic guitar solos to keep you interested. Patient Number 9 is boring. It is a boring, overlong song that does not feature any kind of great, massive tempo shifts. It features Jeff Beck on guitar. He's fine, but nothing special. I've never really been a Jeff Beck fan. And I'm getting a little tired of the Ozzy Osbourne shtick. I didn't need to hear the weird, not creepy, the weird Ozzy Osbourne moment at the beginning when he's going, "Mommy, mommy." Okay, you're 70, dude. You're over 70 years old. Can we stop with the weird, sociopathic implications of your music? I'm not saying give up completely what made you the Prince of Darkness, but recognize your age and also recognize the fact that there are other things you have done and can do that don't have to feature this over the top weirdness. So we're off to a great start. If you didn't like the first single like I didn't, you're not going to be a fan of most of the rest of the album. Second song is Immortal, featuring Pearl Jam's Mike McCready. Again, very generic, run-of-the-mill. Immortal didn't do anything for me. Finally, we get to track 3, Parasite, featuring the one guitarist on this album who really stood out, G. Shocking that it would be Ozzy's former full-time guitar player, Zakk Wylde. Parasite is one of the 3 or 4 decent songs on Patient Number 9. I did like Parasite. And you'll notice that a lot of the songs featuring Zakk Wylde I thought were better than the rest. For track 4, No Escape From Now, Ozzy brings back his old bandmate Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, and the results are one of the worst, if not the worst song on Patient Number 9. Song 5, surprisingly, One of These Days, featuring who I believe to be one of the most overrated rockers, guitar players of all time, Eric Clapton, actually resonated with me. I kind of liked it. The chorus is extremely catchy. I'm paraphrasing here, but again, very catchy. One of these days that I don't believe in Jesus. Then we get to another Jeff Beck song, track 6, 1,000 Shades. Not good. This one might actually be worse than the Tony Iommi song, No Escape From Now. 1,000 Shades is pretty bad. Again, dull, boring, formulaic. Track 7, Mr. Darkness, features Zakk Wylde again. This is one with Zakk that's just okay, not a standout track. Then we get to track 8, once again Zakk Wylde, Nothing Feels Right, which I believe was the third release, the third single that came out right around the time the album itself was released. Nothing Feels Right's pretty good. Compared to the rest of the stuff on this album, it is one of the top 3 songs on Patient Number 9. Another Zakk Wylde song, track 9, is Evil Shuffle. Okay. Again, there's no standout hard rock, heavy metal creativity here. There's nothing along the lines of Over the Mountain, anything off of the classic, fantastic Blizzard of Oz, nothing even close to the level of the songs that Ozzy put out during the 80s. Nothing. I could take the worst song off of Blizzard of Oz, and it was better than anything on Patient Number 9. Then we get to track 10, Degradation Rules, the last of the songs with featured guitar players, going back to Tony Iommi. It's okay. Again, this was the second release before the album actually was released. Again, very repetitive, just like Patient Number 9. Luckily, not 7 minutes long. But Degradation Rules is, again, very repetitive. At least it's catchier than Patient Number 9. This is the kind of album, by the way, where I look back and I go, now I know why people love Randy Rhoads so much. Now I know why people love Jake E. Lee so much. And even why people love Zakk Wylde so much. Those guitar players who actually got to be featured for entire albums with Ozzy were able to form a bond with him over an entire LP, helped make the entire effort better. This whole jumping around, and he's done this before, jumping around from special guest star to special guest star over and over within the same album. The songs come out generic, they're not challenging, and again, not creative. Then the last 3 songs on Patient Number 9 do not have any featured special guest star guitarists. Track 11's Dead and Gone, mediocre again. Track 12, God Only Knows, subpar. Probably one of the 3 worst songs on the album. And then finally, the short, odd closing track, Dark Side Blues. Slide guitar, of course, and harmonica. It is blues, of course. But Ozzy's vocals sound like they're coming out of the bottom of a tin can. At least it's different. That's about the only good thing I can say about Dark Side Blues, is at least it's different compared to the rest of the album. Always love it when my trepidation, my greatest fears going in to listen to an album are reversed. The album exceeds my expectations. The album ends up being much better than I thought it was going to be. Not the case here. My rock and roll alarm in my frontal lobe was going off the minute I heard Patient Number 9, the song, the first time. And unfortunately, my instincts are pretty much right 90% of the time when it comes to this stuff. Patient Number 9 is a vast, great disappointment. Do not, unless you are an absolute dyed-in-the-wool, can't live without him, Ozzy Osbourne fanatic, don't bother with Patient Number 9. Go back and listen to Blizzard of Oz again. Go back and listen to Bark at the Moon or Diary of a Madman. Now, of course, last segment I mentioned, Taylor Hawkins was on 3 songs on Patient Number 9, and there's more coming. I will say this. I listened to the album not even thinking about Taylor Hawkins and what songs he played on. I was more concerned with the guitarists, obviously, since Ozzy made that a point of emphasis. I'll have to go back and see which 3 songs they were. I just didn't hear any song where the drums stood out at all. Again, another reason why I really didn't care one way or the other that Taylor Hawkins was featured on a few of the songs on Patient Number 9. And now, after listening to the album multiple times, I don't really care about hearing these additional tracks he's featured on, not because of him, but because of Ozzy, the songwriting, the lack of creativity or originality. That being said, we've got 3 songs to review this week. Much more positive about these 3 songs than I am about Patient Number 9. Let's start off. Go ahead. I know you're going to be saying under your breath, I can't believe I'm listening to this guy. How can I take him seriously as a rock and roll expert when he likes Nickelback? Well, I could say the same thing about rock and roll snobs out there who love the aforementioned Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Neil Young. I could take one album from Nickelback and have more fun and enjoy it more than any greatest hits package you put together featuring all three of them. Take the best of Dylan, the best of Neil Young, the best of Eric Clapton, put them all on one disc, and you give it to me and you say this is better than any of your Nickelback albums, and I would say, no, it's not. No, it's not. I made the comparison on the Fortress of Rock Facebook page this past weekend as I posted the lyric video for Nickelback's brand new song, San Quentin, for our New Music Sunday. So check that out. Every Friday, Weekend Rock Project. Every Sunday, New Music Sunday on our Facebook page exclusively. But I said, Nickelback is kind of like Taco Bell to me. You know it's not good for you. But it is so awesome that you've just got to indulge once in a while, and you've just got to just enjoy it. Just enjoy it for what it is. And that's how I look at Nickelback. Once in a while, you just want to have fun. You want to have a guilty pleasure. You want to have something that you know most people would look down at you for when it comes to your enjoyment, whether it be a Beavis and Butthead, something silly and stupid like that. To me, Nickelback is the Beavis and Butthead of rock and roll, and that's fine because I love Beavis and Butthead too. Of course, if you guys know Beavis and Butthead, Stuart, the nerd, quote-unquote, friend of the idiotic duo, always wears a Winger shirt, and I love Winger. But of course, Beavis and Butthead, Metallica, AC/DC, ridiculed Stuart. I guarantee if that show, now it's back, but they're still sticking with the old school shirts. But if it was redone today, I'm sure Stuart would be wearing a Nickelback shirt. That's fine. I still love Nickelback. And I love the brand new song, San Quentin. Of course, last week I mentioned brand new album from Nickelback, Get Rollin', comes out November the 18th. San Quentin, straightforward Nickelback. No frills. Chad Kroger's trademark growl. Raspy voice. Partying, getting into trouble. Pushing the limits, and he's just begging for his lawyer to keep him out of San Quentin. Now, the chorus isn't all that catchy. It's just pretty standard. But the lyrics are fun. Lighten up, people. Take it for what it's worth. Meat and potatoes rock and roll. I love it. If you're like me, check out San Quentin from Nickelback. If you're a snob, go listen to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon again, cue it up with The Wizard of Oz, and leave the rest of us who just want to have fun sometimes alone. Third release from Alter Bridge's upcoming album, Pawns and Kings, is Sin After Sin. And let me tell you, not only am I starting to get more and more into the first singles, the first two singles, the title track, Pawns and Kings, and then, of course, the second single was Silver Tongue. Now we get Sin After Sin, which I believe is the best of the three singles so far. Really looking forward to the new album when it comes out in October. Sin After Sin is the song I was waiting for. The first two singles, again, title track, Pawns and Kings, Silver Tongue. Took a little bit of time to get into them. Took 3 or 4 listens to really start getting into them. Sin After Sin, I knew the first time I heard it, this is a fantastic song. Mark Tremonti, the guitarist, he's messing with us again. Now, of course, if you don't know anything about the background for Alter Bridge, Miles Kennedy, one of the greatest, hardest working singers in rock and roll over the past 20 years, basically took over as lead singer for Creed because Mark Tremonti and his bandmates on drums and bass were all backing Scott Stapp in Creed. Now, of course, Alter Bridge is a different animal entirely. Alter Bridge, better, tighter, more majestic, serious hard rock than Creed. Now, if you remember, one of Creed's biggest hits, if not their biggest hit, was a song called Higher. Now, Higher had, and let me preface this by saying I love Mark Tremonti. I love his Tremonti albums with his side band, his side project. I think he's fantastic. I think he's a great guitar player, but he is known, in my humble opinion, for the worst guitar hook of all time. The clunky, awkward guitar hook in Creed's Higher. I cringe every time I hear that song. Luckily, don't hear it that much anymore. Now, with Sin After Sin, he gets close to going too far, overreaching with the guitar hook on Sin After Sin. But he pulls it off this time. Again, gets dangerously, recklessly close to putting out a really awkward, cringe-inducing guitar hook like in Higher. But this one works in Sin After Sin. Sin After Sin, fantastic. Once again, check this one out. Check out the previous 2 singles. And of course, we're looking at late October for a full review of Alter Bridge's new album, Pawns and Kings. And then, of course, I will have a review of Alter Bridge and Mammoth WVH in February of 2023, live in concert. All right, finally, the second release from the Cult's upcoming album. The song is called A Cut Inside. The Cult is not yet to the point where Ozzy Osbourne seems to be, but they seem to have lost some of their edge. There is a great song somewhere here in A Cut Inside. I just don't know if I can quite find it yet. It seems a little bit too subdued. It seems like it's a song that should have been produced, engineered better. This song sounds like it could have had the same kind of fire and intensity as their greatest hits. She Sells Sanctuary, Fire Woman, Wildflower. The first 2 songs off of their upcoming album just sound like they're too subdued. They sound like they could have been both great songs. Sometimes, yes, kids, sometimes production matters. You see it in concerts where the soundboard blows it and ruins what could have been an otherwise fantastic concert. We talked about that a few weeks ago with the stadium tour in Indianapolis. It can happen, of course, on an album as well. And I'm scared to death. Again, my Maestro music alarm is going off in my frontal lobe, because so far Give Me Mercy, the first single, and now A Cut Inside sound like the songwriting is there, but somebody isn't turning it up to 10. Let's put it that way, like they should with a band like The Cult. So check out A Cut Inside. Again, not a bad song at all, but it's just missing something. It's missing that extra kick. And before we head into segment 3, I want to tell you, of course, as I like to do each and every week, where you can find the Fortress of Rock. You've obviously already found it somewhere if you're listening, but your options include Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, and then our more recent additions to the family, Amazon Music and Audible. You can check us out on any of those platforms every Friday night. All right, we are going to have a full segment, and I want to go back a lot of birthdays, a lot of anniversaries in rock and roll history. So, quick promo, and I will be right back with a lot of time traveling in the rock and roll DeLorean. I Want to Go Back is up next. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, time to call up Doc Maestro. Get to 1.21 gigawatts. Get in the rock and roll DeLorean. Travel back in time to some of the greatest moments in rock history, anniversaries, birthdays, classic album releases. Yes, it's time for In Tribute to Eddie Money. I Want to Go Back here on the Fortress of Rock, September the 16th, 2022. Let's start off with anniversaries. Going back to 1979 here on September the 16th. Yes, we're going to talk about rap music. Yes, I know I've told you over and over again on this podcast how much I can't stand and despise modern rap music. The misogyny, the hateful lyrics, the hypocrisy, the stupidity. But I go back to the beginnings of rap music. What is widely acknowledged as the first great rap song. And I agree completely. To this day, it is still one of the few rap songs I can tolerate and even enjoy. I love it. The Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight on this day back in 1979. Hip, hop, hippie to the hip. You know it. You know the song. And if you don't, shame on you. Again, one of the few rap songs out there in history that I can actually listen to and love. Rapper's Delight will always hold a fond place in my heart, even though I am rock and roll through and through. Again, I mentioned the diversity of musical tastes in the 70s and the early 80s. It didn't just have to be rock and roll. It could have been anything. New wave, R&B, hip-hop. We loved all types of music back then. It's not just fractured now. It's ridiculously out of touch. All types of music are out of touch with the core that made them great. Anything from the screaming, asinine new metal that you hear now completely is forgotten. The roots that they came from, same thing with rap music. Listen to Rapper's Delight and compare that to the garbage that's out there now. You can basically take any type of music. I talked about country music recently. The pop sheen that is all over country music now. Outside of singing about pickup trucks and dogs and whiskey, there is little in common with the old school country of the 70s and the early 80s. So again, if you've never listened to Rapper's Delight, check out Sugar Hill Gang, the first truly great rap song ever created. Still to this day, awesome. Go back a couple more years in time to 1977. The legendary Marc Bolan of T Rex dies tragically in a car crash at age 29. And of course, the landscape of rock and roll history is riddled with tragic early deaths like this. Whether it be car crashes, whether it be suicide, whether it be drug abuse. And of course, a lot of people wonder, even as legendary as T Rex has become over the years, the Power Station, of course, had a huge hit with Bang a Gong, Get It On. Just one of many examples of how T Rex influenced music later on, well after Marc Bolan's passing. Luckily, the influence of T Rex has not been ignored, has not been forgotten. But you wonder how big of a legend T Rex could have become if Marc Bolan had not died on September the 16th, 1977. And then finally, before we get into birthdays, 2 historic moments for Jimi Hendrix. First one in 1970, on this date, September the 16th, he made his last public appearance on stage with Eric Burdon, of course, most well known for being the lead singer of the Animals. Again, another tragic death in rock and roll history occurred soon after this. So September the 16th, 1970 was the last time Jimi Hendrix made a public appearance at a music event. And then in 1967, eerily on the same day, Jimi Hendrix hit the US album charts with one of the most influential and arguably greatest albums of all time, Are You Experienced? September the 16th, 1967, Are You Experienced entered the Billboard Top 200 in the United States. Spent a lot of time there. Pretty much 2 years. And I'll admit, again, I am more than willing to admit my flaws. I've never really gotten into Jimi Hendrix as much as I probably should have. Another one of those bands, another one of those artists. When I get the time, I need to go back, revisit, relearn the legend. Yes, shamefully, I've got the Jimi Hendrix Experience greatest hits, and that's it. Even for me, there's so many hours in a day. A lot of bands from the 60s and early 70s I would love to go back, get back into, since they were before my time. And Jimi Hendrix, of course, is one of them. Moving on to birthdays, lots of significant birthdays on September the 16th in rock and roll history. 1964, Dave Snake Sabo from one of my favorite bands, Skid Row, turns 58 years old today. Of course, Skid Row's got a brand new album coming out on October the 14th. The gang's all here with their brand new lead singer. I've said in the past, they're not the same without Sebastian Bach. I'll stand by that. But what I've heard so far from the gang's all here sounds pretty good. Little known fact, some trivia you can drop on your friends at a party or out at the local bar. Ask them if they remember who the guitarist in Bon Jovi was before Richie Sambora. And you will tell them that would be one Dave Snake Sabo. There you go. Fool your friends, fool your family, trip them up on rock and roll trivia night with that one. Going back a year to 1963, okay. I put this one in here on the roster because I have to admit it's a little embarrassing, but I was so into music in the early 80s. I was buying everything. I was buying 1 or 2 albums a week. That's how much good stuff was out there, and that's how much I was devouring music back then in the day. Yes, I bought the debut album from Richard Marx, who turns 59 years old today. Am I proud of myself for buying that album? Not necessarily. It's still down in my basement, buried among the 40 or 50 albums that I held on to. Again, something in my primeval music brain told me, if you can't get a decent trade-in value for them, keep them. And sure enough, vinyl has come back around. Have I listened to any Richard Marx in the past 30 years? No, no, I have not. But there are, now, I mentioned Nickelback in the last segment. To me, it's a guilty pleasure, but only because of all the rock snobs out there who just have this hate for Nickelback that I don't understand. To me, I'm not embarrassed to buy a Nickelback album or tell you to listen to their new single, San Quentin. But there were times in the 80s, as a teenager and a young adult, where there were albums where I kind of had to put on the sunglasses and kind of try to cover my face when I went up to the counter at my local Camelot Music or Musicland. And this was one of those times. I remember I did it with Wham. I think I did it with Duran Duran, although now I have revised my feelings about Duran Duran. I am not feeling guilty about thinking they're fantastic like I did back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, they were kind of a girl band. But they have been able to change their legend and alter it, and now they are cool for everybody. Even Poison, their first album, Look What the Cat Dragged In. As great as the music was, we all know that album cover on their first album is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And unfortunately, I was kind of like that with Richard Marx's debut album. Going back to 1952, the initial bass player for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Ron Blair, who was with the band from 76 to 82. Ron Blair is 70 years old today. Of course, he was replaced by Howie Epstein, who unfortunately succumbed to substance abuse issues. Ron Blair dropped out of the Heartbreakers more because of weariness and fatigue because of being on the road so much in the early days. Now we go back to 1950. Again, just like with Sugar Hill Gang and Rapper's Delight, bear with me here. This is going to seem like a little bit of an odd pick for the Fortress of Rock. But David Bellamy of the Bellamy Brothers, 72 years old today. Two reasons why I needed to put the Bellamy Brothers and specifically David Bellamy in with our birthdays this week. Number one, I've mentioned my fondness, my love for K-Tel albums back when I was 10, 11 years old. They helped to get me into music. Of course, they were compilations of the biggest hits of the day from acts that you really weren't going to go out and buy the albums. They were singles acts, singles performers for the most part. So, of course, the Bellamy Brothers' number one hit from 1976, Let Your Love Flow, was on one of those K-Tel compilations that I had and bought as a child. Well, technically, my parents bought it for me. I was only 11 years old. Come on. And I guess the comparable series you could look at nowadays is what? Now that's what I call music. But I loved my K-Tel albums back when I was a kid. They gave you the best of the current Billboard charts, the top 10 songs, the number one songs that you otherwise wouldn't have decided to go out and buy the entire album for, like a Foreigner. And even Foreigner, I believe, showed up on some K-Tel compilations. Now, the other reason why I picked the Bellamy Brothers for I Want to Go Back here this week is because, yes, I know it originated as a Groucho Marx quote, but they had one of the greatest song titles of all time. When they released the song, If I Said You Had a Beautiful Body, Would You Hold It Against Me? Classic. And again, I know it originates from Groucho Marx, so let's give Groucho some credit here too, but fantastic song title. All right, moving back to 1948, Kenny Jones, 74 years old today. Of course, drummer for the Small Faces, the Faces, and then took on one of the hardest replacement jobs in rock and roll history. He replaced Keith Moon as drummer for The Who. A thankless job. You're never going to win. You're never going to win. Kenny Jones stuck it out as long as he could. Two great Who albums from Kenny Jones' time with the band. Of course, Face Dances and the vastly underrated It's Hard. So even though I know who Keith Moon is, obviously, even though I know the classic Who songs, again, looking at when I grew up, I'm not going to say I identify Kenny Jones more as the drummer of The Who than Keith Moon, but Kenny Jones was the drummer of The Who when I was listening to The Who back in the early 80s. And then finally, I can't do this man justice. All I can tell you is born on September the 16th in 1925, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, B.B. King. A legend. Anything I would say about him beyond that doesn't do him justice. All right, so that's it for I Want to Go Back. I will acknowledge, as I do in this segment every week, my sources for a lot of these stories. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk. And as always, I will tell you, I get ideas for these stories from them in a lot of cases, but as always, the opinions are mine and mine alone. All right, we're almost done. We got one more promo, and then I've got to give you a preview of what's coming up over the next month here on the Fortress of Rock. Wrap It Up is coming up next. Hang out for just a few more minutes with me. I will be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, everybody, that's going to pretty much do it for the Fortress of Rock here on September the 16th, 2022. A couple things to look forward to in terms of reviews in the coming weeks. First and foremost, next week. Reason why I'm recording this a few hours earlier than normal is because I will be seeing Stone Temple Pilots and Everclear tonight in South Bend, Indiana. I'll have a review of that show for you next week. Coming up in a couple weeks in terms of albums. The Lost album from the Smithereens and The Cage, the EP from Billy Idol, both come out on September the 23rd. So on the 30th, I will have a review of one, if not both of those for you. And of course, on that date, September the 30th, the new album from Sammy Hagar and The Circle, Crazy Times, comes out. So I will have a review of that for you the first Friday in October. Nice segue as we go into our songs that we're going to be reviewing here in the next few weeks. The third single from Crazy Times is Funky Feng Shui. Yes, that should sound familiar to you because they released that song as the only new track on their Lockdown album that they recorded during the COVID mess a few years back. So what I'm going to do a compare and contrast kind of review here because the version on Crazy Times is different from the version on Lockdown. So I'm going to compare them both, tell you which one is better, and of course, overall, if the song is good or not. It's Sammy Hagar, so odds are pretty good. The song's decent. Bush, second single off their upcoming album, The Art of Survival. Song is called Heavy is the Ocean. That'll be coming up within the next couple weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. Then finally, going to try to dig this one up. Just got notified about this right before I started taping today. Living Colour has released a new version of Cult of Personality, a live version from Rock in Rio featuring Steve Vai. Love, love, love my Living Colour. So I will try to track down that new live version of Cult of Personality and hopefully have that for you for review within the next few weeks. Of course, I will dig and I will search and I will find new music for you. So hopefully I'll have more than just a few songs and a concert review for you next week. But if not, it's still going to be good enough to make for an awesome breakdown segment. And of course, every week, every Friday is an awesome Fortress of Rock podcast episode for you to enjoy. I got a concert to get ready for. You guys have a weekend to prepare for. I hope you have a safe, fun weekend. And I will talk to you next Friday night, September the 23rd, here on the Fortress of Rock. Take care, kids.